But we've got time for one more question. Debbie Wild, please. Debbie Wild.
Under the benefit cap, should large unemployed families priced out of London move to cheaper areas, or should councils subsidise them to stay?
Under benefit cap, should large unemployed families be priced out of London, move to cheaper areas, or should councils subsidise them to stay? Deborah Meaden.
Oh, my goodness. I was hoping to have a little bit.
Well, you can pass and let Iain Duncan Smith answer it, if you like, and then come back.
Actually, shall I do that, and then I'll respond to it? Oh, OK, there we are.
Iain Duncan Smith.
Well,
rare moment.
let's get the... we should say what the cap is about. The cap is about putting the benefit cap, rather than the housing cap, is about putting a limit to the amount of money that somebody on benefits can receive. The limit we're setting, actually, is at £35,000 a year gross, £26,000 net, which is essentially average earnings. That is a cap that says they can't earn more than that. There are some exemptions, people on disability living allowance, war widows, people who are essentially on working tax credits, they don't get. So it's those who are not working who are not in those exemptions. Does that mean that they should subsidise them? Well, there's already money to help councils to make sure they get settled in the right houses. I don't think there is any need for people to be transferred outside. There is housing inside London and the South East area that actually accommodates them. The reality is we're in touch with all the councils right now, and we're ensuring that essentially they get the money that they need to get to make sure people can be tided over if they've got kids in school, etc. But the key point here to get absolutely right is this cap is about saying, look, when people work out there and they get to average earnings, it is quite mad that we end up paying benefits to people at way higher because they live in very expensive accommodation in different parts of London and the South East. So the cap is fairness to taxpayers as well as being fairness to benefit.
Yvette Cooper. Do you agree with that?
I think that there is an issue about making sure that you're not spending a huge amount of money on the large houses in highest cost areas where some large families do need, larger housing. I think that it's right to have restrictions on the level of benefits that are paid out and on the payments made by the taxpayer. But I think the problem with the way that the government is doing this is that actually the full consequences, not just of the measures that Iain's talking about, but a whole series of other changes that they're making, are actually pushing up homelessness. We've seen a 50% increase in the number of families with children living in bed and breakfast accommodation. That means they can't actually sit and have a meal at a table. They're sitting, eating food on their laps. They don't have any privacy. They're cramped into that accommodation. That's really bad for the kids growing up. It also costs us a huge amount more.
Which government policy is it that Iain Duncan Smith has introduced that is causing that?
It's a mix of them. I think it's a mix of some of the housing benefit changes, but also the benefit cap. It's the combination of the way in which they've introduced...
It doesn't start till April, by the way, just in case you want to know about that.
The combination of the mix of changes that the government is introducing, it is crazy if we end up with welfare reforms that, however well-intentioned, end up costing the taxpayer more, and that's what you should change.
All right, you stay on the front. Come on, let's keep moving here. It's a good debate. Yes.
Yeah, I think the introduction of the benefits was a good thing in the first place. However, it's become quite absurd to think that someone who is not working and getting benefits should earn more than someone who is. I think it's quite absurd. So I think the cap is reasonable, it's appropriate.
All right, Owen Jones.
Firstly, the reason that this whole debate has become so toxic is a cynical demonisation campaign of people on benefits by this government. What they are doing, and you can nod your head in as much as you want. You can shake your head as much as you want, Iain. But what they've tried to do is redirect people's justifiable anger at the ever-declining living standards from those at the top who caused this crisis to people's neighbours down the street. The working poor against the unemployed over benefits. Non-disabled people against disabled people over benefits.
£26,000 a year.
Private sector workers against public sector workers over pensions. That housing benefit, that housing benefit is not going into the... That housing benefit is not going into the pockets. Let me... Sorry, I'll come on to that.
No, don't... No, just to answer in...
Housing benefit is not going into the pockets... Housing benefit is not going into the pockets of tenants, it's lining the pockets of wealthy landlords charging extortionate rents because successive governments, New Labour included, think from council housing. But I have to raise that point the audience has just raised about disabled people, because it isn't just about the cap. And if there are two names,
but they're exempted from the cap.
If there's anything I want you to remember from this programme,
people are exempted from the cap.
There are two names I want you to remember.
No, disabled people are exempted from
Brian
the cap.
McArdle.
No, listen. The question is
We've got to widen this.
Don't go off onto some other. Don't go off some other agenda you have. Answer the question about unemployed families. That was
the point about unemployed families. At the moment, as I've said, that housing benefit isn't going into them. It's lining the pockets of landlords because successive governments didn't build their rents.
Charles Kennedy.
Well, I don't doubt Owen's sincerity on this matter at all, but I mean, I hope he would accept I'm not somebody who can readily be labelled as part of some terrible political conspiracy to single out groups in society and try and blame them on all our ills. I think clearly the housing benefit system, and indeed I think Yvette has alluded to this as well, has burgeoned to such an extent that even without the austerity package, now that's a different debate that we could all have, but even without the need for an austerity package or the extent of the austerity package, any government here today, of whatever political persuasion, would have to address it, and indeed Labour were doing so.
But you don't agree with Sarah Tether, your former minister, who said that the welfare cap was immoral?
No, well, I think when politicians start using words like immoral, I mean, I'd probably leave that to Anglican bishops, actually, to talk about immorality. What surprises me about her comments, I don't know if she's clarified this or not, she's perfectly entitled to her view. I don't think that what Iain Duncan Smith is doing is immoral. I don't think in opposition what Iain did in terms of his Centre for Social Justice was immoral either.
All right, don't shout out. Let him. Madam, please don't shout out from the back. Please don't shout out. Let him speak.
I'm not complaining at all, madam. This is the home of free speech. I can hardly disagree with that, can I?
All right. But then, we can't hear what you're saying anyway. All right, Deborah Meaden.
I want to pick up on a point, Owen, and you talk about the demonisation of people on welfare benefits. I personally think that's a pretty outdated view, because there are a lot of people who are... We are in... Welfare benefits happen to be a very sad, awful truth of the moment. Truth of the matter is this country has got so much... the same as any company with any budget has got so much money to spend. I think it is very wise to make sure that we allocate... I think it's very wise to make sure that we have a cap on benefits, but I also think it's very wise to make sure that those people who are the neediest get that money. The right people get that money, and that's what we need.
But the problem is that at the moment, what you're getting is you've got working families who are losing thousands of pounds in their tax credits. That's working families at the same time as millionaires are getting a £40,000 tax cut. That is what's unfair.
Most new claimants of housing benefit are in work. They don't have enough money to pay extortionate rents. If we built housing in this country, we'd bring down the welfare bill, stimulate the economy and create jobs. But there is a point as well that has to be made about the treatment of disabled people in this country. And there are two names I just want to give Iain, and if there's anything he remembers, it's this. Brian McArdle, 57 years old, paralysed down one side, blind in one eye, he couldn't speak. He died one day after being found fit for work by ATOS. Another example, Karen Sherlock.
Hang on a second, we've heard a lot from you. Let me tell you something. I didn't hear you screaming about 2.5 million people who are parked, nobody saw them for over 10 years, not working, with no hope, no aspiration. We are changing their lives. I'm proud of doing that. Getting them off benefit is what we're going to do.
1,100 people.
All right, that's it. I'm afraid our time's up.